What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I just recently got back from my very first solo trip to Disney World. So I am coming at you with all of my top tips, pros and cons, and I even did a question box over on Instagram asking you guys what questions you had about going to Disney solo. So I'm gonna answer all of those questions at the end of this video, but I have so much to share, so let's just dive in. If you do want to check out my trip vlogs, I will have that playlist linked for you. That way you can get a play-by-play of how my trip actually went and you can kind of see for yourself. But let's dive into the pros of going to Disney World first, and then we'll switch over to the cons. I just think starting with the pros is way more fun. All right. Pro number one is you get to stay where you want to stay. So for me, when I'm traveling with my husband and my daughter, I'm thinking about what's gonna accommodate us as a family. So I'm gonna look for maybe a 1-bedroom villa, something with a kitchenette, something that is close to Magic Kingdom, something that is a little more budget friendly because we're gonna be spending more on tickets, things like that. And maybe you have a large family and typically you would need a 2-bedroom villa, or you would have to stay off-site for budget purposes, or I don't know, there's so many factors that go into choosing your resort. Maybe your kids are older, maybe your kids are little and you have babies and toddlers. So depending on what your family looks like, the resort you choose for your vacation may look very different than what you would choose if it was just you. So for me, I picked Bay Lake Tower and I loved not having to worry about transportation. That was a big thing for me. I didn't want to rent a car. I knew I wanted to utilize Disney transportation, and Bay Lake Tower is super close to Magic Kingdom. I mean, it's the only resort apart from Grand Floridian now that you can walk to Magic Kingdom. So if I'm walking at a brisk pace, I can walk over in about 5 minutes. And then of course you have access to the monorail to Magic Kingdom and Epcot, and it attaches to the rest of those monorail resorts as well. So I loved the location and the transportation aspect. So that was really important to me. But maybe you want to spend a lot of time at Epcot. Being at the Food and Wine Festival is really important to you, and staying at the boardwalk or the beach club may be a great fit. But on another trip with a really large family, a smaller room at the boardwalk isn't going to accommodate everybody the best. So that's my number one pro, is that you get to pick the accommodations that fits you, your needs, your budget, what you want to do, and what's important to you on a solo trip. All right, the next and probably the most obvious pro of going to Disney solo is that you get to do what you want whenever you want to do it. It is so nice to be able to wake up in the morning and decide, do I want to rope drop Magic Kingdom today? Not really feeling it. I'm gonna take my time getting ready this morning. I'm gonna go get a coffee, and you can change plans last minute and you can make your trip look like whatever you want it to look like. It's pretty amazing, and you don't have anyone else sharing their opinions, what's important to them, what they want to do. And on other trips where it's your family, maybe, you know, you have Bobby who's really wanting to get on Rise of the Resistance, you have your husband who's wanting to just hang out at Baseline Tap House, and then you have little Susie who wants to go meet Minnie Mouse. And so you have 4 different things you guys want to do as a family, and you have to decide what you're going to do in that moment and take turns and kind of coordinate the day accordingly. But when it's just you, you get to decide what you want to do. It is so great. And I think another thing I love about it is, like I mentioned, you can change plans on the fly. So there was an afternoon where I was hanging out at Magic Kingdom, and my plan was to go grab a bite to eat and then come right back to the park for the extended evening hours and keep riding rides. But after dinner, I wasn't really feeling the extended evening hours anymore. So I decided to do my own little monorail resort lounge crawl, and I hit a couple different lounges that I'd been wanting to try and just relaxed the rest of the evening and didn't head back to the park. As compared to if you were with your entire family, maybe everyone else had their heart set on the extended evening hours, and changing plans like that may not be that simple. So when you're on your own, It's really that simple. You just get to decide what you want to do. I was on the monorail and we stopped at the Grand Floridian. I wasn't planning on getting off, but I decided as the doors were opening that I'm gonna get off and head over to the Enchanted Rose and grab a drink. And again, it was that simple. And I didn't have to consult anyone. I wasn't having to ask if that was okay, if everyone else was okay with that. It was really easy. So that is probably the best part of going to Disney solo, is that you get to do what you want whenever you want to do it. The next pro of going to Disney solo is being able to take advantage of the single rider line. And not a lot of rides offer this, but the ones that do can save you a significant amount of time. I was able to cut my wait time in half by using the single rider line on Rock and Roller Coaster. It's also an option at Expedition Everest and Smuggler's Run. So those are some great rides that the wait time can get a little bit higher, but if you take advantage of that single rider line, y'all, it's the way to go. Another perk is even if the ride doesn't have a specific single rider line, a lot of times when you get closer to the front, some of the cast members may be looking for a smaller party with 1 or 2 people. And so when they're in the front asking, you know, okay, we need 1 person, we need 2 people, you can raise your hand and you kind of get to bump to the front of the line. So that's another perk of doing rides solo, is you may not have to wait quite as long. The next pro of going to Disney solo is that there's more availability at restaurants. So it's easier to get a reservation. It's easier to walk up and ask if there's a table available, especially at lounges and bars. That's really where I preferred to eat. I felt the most comfortable eating at lounges instead of sit-down meals. I did do 1 sit-down meal at Steakhouse 71, and getting a reservation for 1 person was way easier than getting a reservation for 5 or 6 people. And like I mentioned with the lounges, it's so much easier to walk up and find a seat for 1 person as compared to 4 or 5 people. You know what I mean? When I walked up to the Trader Sam's lounge over at the Polynesian, now that place is packed. It is so difficult to get a table in there. You're waiting upwards of 1 to 2 hours, I mean, just to get a seat. And so when I walked in, I just needed a space for 1 person, and I was fine with standing room only. I mean, I just wanted to grab a drink and experience Trader Sam's. So I did have to wait a little bit, but I was called way quicker by just being 1 person, and I found a seat at the very end, and it was perfect. It's way easier to find availability at places like that, like Trader Sam's, Enchanted Rose, even the California Grill Lounge, Nomad Lounge over in Animal Kingdom. I mean, there are so many hidden gem spots where you can walk right in and get a seat. That is another huge pro of going to Disney solo. All right, and my last pro is that you have more time to soak in the atmosphere. Time somehow moves a little bit slower when you're on your own at Disney, because typically when you're traveling with a large group or your family, you're very focused on all the people you're with, and you're talking to them all day long, and it's a very just go, go, go kind of a feel. But when you're on your own, again, time seems to move a little bit slower somehow, and you just have more capacity to focus on everything happening around you. And you can take in some of the details that maybe you haven't noticed before. One of my favorite moments in Magic Kingdom was finding a spot in front of the castle and just sitting there. I just sat and I had nowhere to be. I didn't have anyone to talk to, but I just sat there and I got to listen to the music. There was a cavalcade going by. It was such a sweet moment to just soak in the atmosphere. I didn't sit there long, but it felt like a long time because I was on my own. But moments like that were some of my favorite looking back. And again, you just have more time to soak in that atmosphere. So that is my last pro of going to Disney solo. All right, let's move on to the cons of going to Disney World on your own, because there are a couple things that are not so great about going to Disney World solo, and they're important to know. The first con of going to Disney solo is probably the most obvious thing, but you do have moments of feeling lonely. And I actually didn't feel this as much as I thought I would. I was a little nervous, of course, thinking, oh, it's gonna be awkward. Am I gonna feel super lonely? But it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but it is something to be aware of. And of course, acknowledge that you are alone at Disney World. You don't have anyone to talk to unless you're sitting in a lounge and you can kind of strike up conversation with people around you. Cast members are always amazing to chat with. So I always had someone to chat with, but in the moments where you maybe are having a really sweet moment, like you're sitting in front of the castle soaking in the atmosphere, you don't have anyone sitting next to you to share that moment with. And personally, as a mom, I loved having a little bit of time where no one was needing me. So that was really nice. But maybe you're not a mom and maybe you love going to Disney World with everybody and you're wondering, oh, I don't know if I would enjoy going to Disney solo for that very reason, because you do have moments of feeling lonely. So it's something to think about, and just everybody's personality is so different though. So know that my experience may look so different than your experience. I didn't have that lonely feeling very often, but again, there were a couple of moments where I thought, oh man, I really wish my husband was sitting here with me right now. This would be really sweet to share this with him. Or sitting in Trader Sam's, you know, it's a really fun environment. The cast members there working are hilarious, and I'm thinking, oh, if my husband was sitting here right now, he would be saying this, or he'd be making this joke, or I'd be laughing more. And you know, so I had a couple of moments like that, and it definitely is the main con of going to Disney solo, obviously. My second con of going to Disney solo is that you don't have anyone there to help you make decisions. Maybe you are a really indecisive person and you like having someone in your party to say, we're gonna go eat here, let's go ride this next, and you just like being along for the ride. So that can definitely be a negative aspect of going to Disney on your own. There were a few moments where I did feel that, where I thought, okay, should I go do this or this? And I wished that my husband was there to say, let's definitely do this because XYZ. And I really just had to decide in the moment on my own what I wanted to do, even if I was trying to decide between two different things. So it's fun to have someone to kind of talk through the decisions with you, and not having anyone really removes that element out of the picture, and you just kind of have to decide what you're gonna do, whether it's where you're gonna go, which park you're gonna hop to, what lounge you're gonna sit down at, what ride to do next. You know, you just have to be okay with making those decisions on your own. Okay, let's move on to the questions that you guys asked me over on Instagram. It's funny because about half of the questions are exactly the same, just worded a little bit different, but some of these questions were really, really good. So I'm just gonna jump right into the first one. Let's start with the most popular question, the one that was asked the most, and it is, did you ever feel awkward or lonely? And I think I kind of answered this already, but you know, I did have a couple of moments where I felt lonely. I don't know if I ever felt awkward being there alone. I think I was just so happy to be there and so happy to have some time to myself that I didn't ever view it as awkward. And no one ever really made any comments to me about, oh, you're here alone, or you know, anything like that. So it was never a big deal. And I think in your mind, especially leading up to the trip, you're thinking, oh, everyone's gonna think I'm so weird. Everyone's gonna be staring at me, wondering what I'm doing. But I promise you, no one's looking at you. I think everybody is so involved with their own family and what they're doing and their plans and their kids that no one's looking at you thinking, that's weird. You know what I mean? If anything, I remember there was a moment on our last trip in December, we were eating at the Grand Floridian Cafe, and there was a woman eating at a table by herself, and I only noticed her because she was sitting directly behind Andy. And I remember thinking, wow, that looks amazing. She's sitting there just sipping on a glass of wine, eating a salad. Oh, that just looks like the dream. I remember that was my thought, not, oh, I wonder if everything's okay, or, oh, that has to be so lonely. Like, my thought was, that looks incredible. I wish that was me right now. So, but if anyone is looking at you, they're most likely thinking, wow, that looks amazing. Not, oh, that looks awkward or lonely. You know what I mean? But all that to say, I did have moments of feeling lonely, but never awkward. I felt very comfortable and very confident going to Disney World on my own. I will say that if you are planning a trip to Disney solo, make sure that it's not your very first time in Disney World. I think because I've been so many times now, I'm able to walk into the parks and I feel comfortable and confident, and there's zero awkward awkwardness because I've been so many times before, and it just kind of feels like your second home. So if you are planning to go solo, make sure that you've been a couple of times before so that you can go into your trip feeling confident. Okay, the next question is, were there times you felt bored, like waiting in lines, etc.? And honestly, not really. I mean, anytime I was waiting in line for something, I had my phone, or I was vlogging, or texting my husband, or on social media. Like, I always had something to stay busy with. So that would be my tip, is make sure you have a portable phone charger and you are all ready to go. And maybe you don't have a YouTube channel, but still vlog your trip anyway. I mean, it's still fun to come home and show your family or your friends, and it's just fun to document. But I honestly never felt super bored waiting in line. I also never waited in line for anything longer than 30 minutes. So I think as long as you have your phone, a portable charger, you're gonna be set. All right, the next question is, how long would you recommend for a solo trip, and do you plan to go solo more often now? The second part to that answer is, I don't know. I don't have any plans for another solo trip in the future right now. I don't know if Andy would want to miss out on another Disney trip ever again. So I'm not sure. But the first part to that question, how long would I recommend for a solo trip? I went 2 nights and 3 days. Personally, I think that is the perfect time, especially if this is your first solo trip. I think it was a good way for me to ease into it. But I know a lot of people love going to Disney World solo for 6, 7, 8 days. But my recommendation would be 3 days. I think that was the perfect amount of time to enjoy the parks. I could see everything I wanted to see, but I didn't feel like I was on my own for a full week. So that's why I think 3 days was really the perfect amount of time. Maybe 4 days, but I think anywhere in that range is great for a solo trip. All right, the next question is, did you ride most of the rides alone or with other people? And the short answer is, you always ride with other people. So Disney is really quick to throw you in with another party. So especially as one person, if there is a boat and it has 5 people and there's a party of 4, you will always be that 5th person to join that party. Same thing, for example, with Rock and Roller Coaster. They're always gonna fill that extra seat from the single rider line, so you will always ride with another person. And sometimes that other person is friendly, and you know, you can strike up a conversation, and I always sit down and just say hello, like, oh, how are you doing? Or have you ridden this before? And see if they're feeling chatty. If not, just kind of let them have their experience, and you just ride with another person. So the next question is, did you ever feel scared in your room at night? And no, I really didn't. I think especially because I was staying on property in a Disney resort hotel, it felt very secure to me, and I was never out wandering in the parking lot late at night or anything like that. I mean, I was definitely smart about being there on my own, but I never really felt scared in my room at night. Now, of course, the door was locked and the deadbolt was was locked, but I never felt scared or nervous or anything. Now, I did talk to my husband at night, like as I was getting ready for bed and things like that, so I didn't give myself an opportunity to just sit there and be scared, but I felt very secure, very confident, very safe, especially again with it being an on-site Disney hotel. It felt very secure to me. You know, of course, take all the necessary precautions when traveling alone. I could do a whole separate video on that, and just being smart, be aware of your surroundings, walk in wisdom, you know, all the things. Don't announce that you're there by yourself. I mean, you know, all the obvious things. But yeah, I felt very safe, very secure in my room. Okay, this next question is a good one. How was the mom guilt? It's like the one thing holding me back. And honestly, leading up to this trip, had released myself from the guilt of leaving Ellie Rose behind. Ellie just turned 2, and we decided that it was the best thing for her to stay behind and for me to go and just enjoy myself. And I think, to be honest, every mom needs a break like this every now and then. And maybe it's not a 3-day, 2-night trip. Maybe it's just a day or maybe an afternoon. But if you're able to do a night away or 2 nights away, y'all, this was the most refreshing 3 days. Being smack dab in the middle of toddler mom world, this was so nice. And again, I released myself from the guilt of it. Andy reassured me that he was confident at home with her, and his parents, my in-laws, they stepped in and they were able to take care of her during the day. And so I knew that everything was covered at home, so there was nothing for me to feel anxious about, wondering, you know, how are things going? And I was able to FaceTime with her in the mornings and at night, so I still had that interaction with her, and it was really sweet coming home. But I will say, being there on my own, not having to worry about diaper changes, not having to refill snack cups, not having to clean up messes, not being needed for 48 hours or 72 hours, it was so nice. So just embrace it, release yourself from the guilt, and accept that it's okay to have a break and everything is gonna be okay. So that would be my advice. If mom guilt is the thing holding you back, release yourself from that and just embrace the help at home and enjoy a little bit of a break. All right, and the last question, this is another good one. Would you have done a solo trip pre-baby, no kids, but I can't imagine going without my other half? I actually read this question when it came in and I thought, ooh, that's a good one. I honestly don't know. It's easy to say now, oh yeah, solo trips are amazing. It was so nice to have a little bit of a break. I loved being on my own. It wasn't awkward at all. But if I had planned this trip 4 years ago, would I still have the same feeling about it? And I'm honestly not sure. I can't imagine going without Andy 4 years ago. I think having a toddler made it to where there was another level of excitement to be able to have a couple nights away. And as a mom, you realize the value in having free time. And like I mentioned, those moments where you're not needed, those moments feel a little more precious because you know what it's like to be needed every second of every day. So that's my long answer to that question. I honestly don't know if I would have done this trip or felt confident enough to do this trip a few years ago, pre-Ellie Rose. But I will say, all I know is my experience from how I felt on this most recent trip, and it was amazing and so refreshing. But even if you don't have kids, I still think that you could enjoy a trip like this. Maybe you're somebody who works full-time and your schedule is super demanding at home and it's just, life is crazy. It might still be nice to go on your own and just have a break from the world. You know what I mean? So whatever stage of life you're in, I think there are definitely pros to going on your own. And then keep in mind the cons that I mentioned as well. But yeah, that's kind of my long answer to that question. Okay, well, this video went way longer than I expected, but I hope this was helpful, hearing some of the pros and cons to going to Disney World solo and hearing my answer to some of these questions. So whether you're planning a trip to Disney World solo or maybe you're just curious about it, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was interesting. And let me know if you have any other questions in the comments down below. If you are planning a trip to Disney World solo in the near future, let me know down below. I would love to hear all about it and chat with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.